because when you're looking at an organization like FCA, part of it is how effective are we at ministering to kids? The other part of it, though, is how effectively are we at raising money so that we can go minister to kids? And it's kind of two elements of the organization, but it works for both.
Yep.
100% works for both. And you get these lead measures out there that tell you like, hey, attendance at these meetings or these events with kids is going down or going up, and that's going to trigger engagement issues in the future, or it's going to trigger fundraising issues, because if you're churning kids, then that means their parents may not be donating to you in the future as well. So all of those things, I think, made the team smarter about their day-to-day stuff.
Right. And so you talk about smart, executing effectively and efficiently. There's the other side, right, that I talked about, which is healthy.
Yep.
Right. And I sat back and I thought, number one, I really need to hear what the community needs and wants. So I took a year to do that and spent a lot of time repairing and rebuilding and forming new relationships. And then I spent the next year studying comparable organizations and their strategic plans. And they all basically said the same thing, minus some adjustments based on structural differences. And so for a lot of business leaders, I think what they lose sense of, and certainly in the nonprofit space where we are so obsessed with that big vision, we lose sight of the fact that to get to those big impact, to that area of change, it takes a methodical grit, grind, and drive.
It's not something you flip the light switch on, I will tell you. And to your point about running a marathon, like getting good at a framework like this, and we're going to talk about what's in it in a second, but like it's practice. It is a discipline, and you get better at it over time.
Well, if you're going to not focus on your rocks, but you're going to deal with the pebbles and sand and all the water that demands of your time, you never get to those big things. So let's put those rocks into that jar.
First.
Then we'll first, and then we pour the rocks in, and they fill in the space, and then we'll deal with the sand, right, and then the water, and everything fits. But most of us sit down at our computer in the quiet of the morning and
we read our email
exactly for 2 hours. Well, that's sand.
Yeah.
Right.
And this idea that, look, the story is about Sully Sullenberger, who was the pilot who took off from LaGuardia Airport and ran into a flock of birds and had to land on the Hudson River. What inspires us the most about that is that he took something, right, some sort of problem, he turned it into an issue that he had to solve.
I skipped over one part, which is when I launched this strategic planning process, I wasn't going to do a traditional strategic planning where you spend a year and bring together all these resources and you have a beautiful document and you never then go back to check what progress you're making.
Right.
It becomes a very concretized process. And in the dynamic that we live, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit, business is dynamic, but business is challenging. You need an iterative set of tools to be able to make adjustments on the fly. And frankly, I was exhausted by crisis management, right? So that the human dynamic, if we are constantly firefighting and we're constantly making decisions where not all of the right decision makers are around those, or in those conversations because they are happening on the fly. Part of the brilliance, I think, of EOS was it changes the whole dynamic where it says, hold on, folks. We're going to have one conversation where all of the influencers in those decisions will be around the table, and now we're going to engage in a dynamic where we can wrestle over issues,
right?
Where it's not my personal identity, it's my contribution towards the betterment of the outcome for the organization.
But one of the things I think has been so helpful with you being involved at Handbid, and I think also for anybody who's thinking about EOS and thinking about should I or should I not hire an implementer, is you've come in and not just told us what we already know. You help us like flesh out issues. You help us get to the root, I would say, element of some of the things that we're, challenges that we're facing and figure them out. And so I would almost say you've helped us figure out what we don't know.
And
And
you create a social pact, which gets us to the values. You define values, And now you live by those values, and you expect everybody in the organization to behave to those values. These aren't lofty aspirational values. These are values that guide how we're going to interact, how we're going to behave in this organization. And one of those unsaid values, it's a stated value, but it may not be unique to your particular Handbids values, but it's how you live, which is disagree and commit, right? Mm-hmm. So some of the tools that I teach it ties to a shift in mindset.